It is just after dawn on the 19th of September 1944, and a young American tank gunner is staring into a wall of grey fog so thick he cannot see the front of his own Sherman. Then the fog moves. 75 yards away, a shape hardens out of the murk long gun barrel, sloped armor, the unmistakable silhouette of a German Panther. Then another behind it. Then another. Gun Panther, 12 o'clock fire. The Sherman bucks. The shell streaks across the field and slams into the Panther's flank at point-blank range. The tank shudders, smokes, and stops. Somewhere to the left, another American gun cracks. Then, everything comes apart at once. This is the story of a battle almost nobody remembers. A battle where American tanks were outnumbered, outgunned, and low on fuel, and still tore a German Panzer army to pieces in the fog. Welcome back to America's War Archives. If you're new here, stick around. This is exactly the kind of story we live for. Out of gas. By September 1944, George Patton and his Third Army had been running wild across France. They had torn out of Normandy and raced east faster than anyone thought possible, chasing a broken German army toward the border of Germany itself. And then, Patton ran out of gas. Literally, the advance had outrun its own fuel supply. Tankers sat idle by the roadside, engines dead, while Patton raged. "My men can eat their belts," he snarled. "But my tanks have got to have gas." Every day his army sat still was a day the Germans used to catch their breath, dig in, and pull together new units to stop him. And the Germans had a plan. They were going to hit Patton where he was weakest: the trap. In the region of Lorraine, near a small town called Arracourt, the exposed flank of Patton's army was held thin mostly by the 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A. Tankers and tank destroyers spread across the misty fields. The Germans massed fresh panzer brigades against them, brand new units built around the Panther, a tank with thick frontal armor and a deadly high-velocity gun. A beast that could kill an American Sherman from far beyond the range the Sherman could kill it. On paper, it was a slaughter waiting to happen. The Germans outnumbered the defenders in armor, and their tanks were, gun for gun, simply better. They had one problem: the men inside the American tanks were better, and the fog was about to make every advantage the Panther had, its long range, its heavy front armor, completely useless. The fog. That morning the fog rolled in thick and low, and the great German advantage evaporated into it. Range meant nothing when you couldn't see past 100 yards. The Panther's frontal armor meant nothing when an American tank could appear out of the mist beside you and put a shell straight through your thin-side plating. The Germans came on anyway, blind, feeling their way forward through the murk, and drove straight into an ambush they never saw. American Shermans and the fast, lightly armored M18 Hellcat tank destroyers were waiting, hidden in the fog and the folds of the ground. They let the Panthers roll past, then hit them from the flank at ranges so short you couldn't miss. Hold. Hold. Let him come. A Panther grinds past a hidden Hellcat, close enough to hear its engine. The Hellcat's gunner tracks it, breathing hard. Now fire. The 76 Mimi gun barks. The shell punches through the Panther's flank. The crew bails. Before the Hellcat can even reposition, its commander is screaming a new order: back up. Back up. Move. Because in this fog, the hunter and the hunted trade places in a heartbeat. Chaos in the mist. What followed was not a battle in any neat sense. It was chaos. Blind, roaring, point-blank chaos. Tanks loomed out of the fog and died in seconds. Muzzle flashes lit the grey like lightning inside a cloud. Crews fired at shapes, at engine noise, at the glow of a burning hull. A Sherman and a Panther rounded the same hedgerow from opposite sides and nearly collided, guns swinging. The American crew fired first by half a second and lived. The Germans didn't. The M18 Hellcats were the killers of the day. Thinly armored, but blisteringly fast, they used their speed like a weapon, darting through the fog, flanking the heavier Panthers, striking from the side and vanishing before the Germans could turn their guns. A Panther's turret traversed too slowly to catch them. By the time it swung around, the Hellcat was already gone, and another was already firing from the opposite flank. There on the right, traverse right, fire. A German gunner screams into his own chaos, swinging his turret toward a shape that is already gone. He never sees the second Hellcat that puts a round through his flank. Time and again the pattern repeated. The Germans, blind and confused, pushed into ground they didn't understand, against crews who knew exactly where to wait. The panzer brigades bled tanks they could not afford to lose, burning wrecks marking the fog where each one died. But the Germans did not quit. They came again and again. Day after day the counterattacks rolled forward out of the mist, and day after day the American tankers and gunners met them and broke them, giving ground where they had to, counterattacking where they could, holding a line that by every calculation should have collapsed. Behind the tanks, American artillery hammered the German assembly areas, catching panzers as they massed for another push, so that some attacks were shattered before they even began. And still the outnumbered defenders held. Then the sky cleared. The plains. For days the fog had grounded the Allied Air Force. Now, at last it lifted, and the German tank crews looked up into a clear sky and saw the thing they feared most. P-47 Thunderbolts. The fighter bombers came down out of the sun in screaming dives, and for the exposed German armor caught in the open, there was nowhere to hide. What the fog had hidden, the clear sky now revealed long columns of panzers strung across open country, with American pilots circling above like hawks. The Thunderbolts rolled in one after another. Rockets streaked down and burst among the tanks. Machine gun fire raked the columns. Bombs walked across the German armor in gouts of flame and earth. A panzer that had survived the fog only to be caught in the open was a dead machine, and the pilots knew it. On the ground, the American tankers watched the sky do their work and pushed forward to finish it. Caught between the tanks in front and the planes above, the German attack came apart completely. Burning panzers dotted the fields. Crews abandoned undamaged tanks and ran. The counter-offensive that was meant to smash Patton's flank collapsed into a retreat. The reckoning. When it was over, the numbers told the whole story. The German panzer brigades had been gutted, dozens upon dozens of their precious tanks destroyed, some of their new units all but wiped out of existence. American losses, by comparison, were a fraction of that. An outnumbered, outgunned American force, low on fuel and holding a thin line, had met one of the last real armored punches the Germans could throw in the West, and had crushed it. Not because their tanks were better, because they weren't, but because their crews were better trained, their tactics were smarter, and they had turned the fog and the ground and the sky into weapons the Germans never mastered. It was one of the largest tank battles ever fought on the Western Front, and one of the most lopsided American victories of the entire war. And almost nobody remembers it. Patton, of course, was already looking east, already impatient, already demanding more gas so he could get moving again. To him, holding was never the point. Advancing was the point. But the men of his Third Army had just proven something that mattered far beyond one foggy corner of France, that when the Germans threw their best steel at Patton's army, that army did not break. It killed. That's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button. It genuinely helps get these stories out to more people who love history. And if you're not already subscribed to America's War Archives, now is a great time to fix that. Leave a comment about which moment gripped you most, and we'll see you in the next one.